if you've ever heard of EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So that's a lot of jumbled up words. And I'll explain it in a minute, but I think that a common misconception about it, especially when I first explain it to my clients, is they think it's hypnotism. But that's not the case. You're fully conscious and aware the entire time. So starting with that, I'll tell you all about it and how I would talk to my clients about it when we're deciding if we want to go down that road. My name's Hannah Bodenhorn. I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and this is the Reflection Room. Thank you for joining. So if we're talking about EMDR, then I have to tell you about the stages of sleep, because they go hand in hand. When we sleep, we go through 4 stages, and the deepest stage of sleep is REM sleep, and that stands for rapid eye movement. Same eye movement we use in EMDR. So that's where the connection is. But there's a little bit more to it. When we're sleeping, in the EMDR world, or the therapists that use it, we believe that dreams are a big jumbled up story that our brains create to help us process the day. So it could be faces we saw, things that happened, all kinds of jumbled up things, and your brain creates this crazy story, and that's how you process the day, which is simple. And we don't have to do any work, which is really nice. But when something traumatic happens, it doesn't happen that way. We usually develop a negative belief from that traumatic event. And those negative beliefs are what hold us back, and it's what keeps us from chasing after relationships or chasing after that job we really want. They just really bring us down, and they affect so many different areas of our lives. So EMDR targets that negative belief and that traumatic event. Targeting those together can be very emotional, but it brings up all the things that you've been probably shoving down and trying to avoid, which we all do it, and I'm guilty of it too, but we want to get those out of your system. With EMDR, we use that same rapid eye movement. Another term for it in the EMDR world is bilateral stimulation, because we're triggering both sides of our brain. We want to use back and forth and back and forth. And we may do that with a big light bar in the office. The original way, when Dr. Francine Shapiro developed this type of therapy, it was the late 80s, and she just used her hand. So that's where people think that it's hypnotism, because of the eye movement, and we're going back and forth. I don't use my hand. I did at the beginning, but now I have different methods of using bilateral stimulation. Sometimes it can be tactile too, where you hold 2 buzzers in each hand and they go back and forth. So you just close your eyes and you feel the vibration, because it's still triggering each side of your body. So we're using that bilateral stimulation, and we're also going to create a plan, a target sequence plan. So that's going to have a negative belief, the one we were just talking about. That could be, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not safe. There's plenty, and there could be multiple. If there's multiple, we can do multiple plans for different negative beliefs. But say we're just going to work on one. So I'm not good enough. We're going to have that, and then the targeted event. So that event that caused it, or stands out the most for causing it. So say you're coming into therapy because you just went through a breakup. So you went through this breakup, you've been distraught, haven't been able to handle it, and you've developed this negative belief of, I'm not good enough. Well, you likely developed it much earlier than that, and this is just making it worse. If that's what's bothering you the most, we'll use that as our target. But if we find out that there's something that happened when you were a child or an adolescent, and that created the negative belief, I'm not good enough, and it stands out even more than the breakup, then we'll probably target that. But, so say we're going to use this breakup as the target. We have our breakup, we have the negative belief, I'm not good enough, and then we're going to have a positive belief. Now this one is true. This positive belief is true. It's a fact. It's guaranteed, but you may not believe it to be true. And the goal is to get you to the point where you believe it's true. So, for example, this one's my favorite. I love using this positive belief with clients. I have value regardless. And this is true for everybody, for every human being, because every human being on this planet has value, regardless of their circumstances. They have value. So I love using this one. And I would say with I'm not good enough, it pairs perfectly. But it depends on the person. If they have something in mind already, then they can use that. And even in my Christian counseling, because I also specialize in Christian counseling, I may use examples from the Bible for clients if they choose to do that, and if they choose for Christian counseling. But not all clients of mine are Christian, and that's okay too. So we'll just leave it right now for I have value regardless. So with our positive belief, now we have our full plan. And there's a little bit more to it, but I can get into that in a later video. So we have our plan, and now we're going to start our EMDR. First, before our first session of EMDR, we've already developed some different coping skills that are going to help if you continue to process, because you can. After the session, you can continue processing for up to 3 days. So in those 3 days, or anytime really, when I'm not with you or you're not in my office, I want you to be able to cope with things that come up on your own. So we're going to make sure that you've got it all down, that you've been practicing for the weeks leading up to it, and we're good to go. So we've got our coping skills, we've got our plan. Now with our first session of EMDR, we're going to do our ratings. So we rate our negative belief on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most disturbing. So that's when you think about it, like how disturbing does it feel to you? What kind of thoughts are coming up? Now, I'm not going to ask you to go into depth on those thoughts just yet, but on that scale, let's say it's a 10. So the very worst, like brings you to tears at the thought of I'm not good enough. Now we're going to rate the positive belief on a scale of 1 to 7. 7 is the most true. So this is not if it's a fact, this is how you feel about it. So this could be different moment to moment, but in this moment, on that scale of 1 to 7, how do you feel when I say you have value regardless? Most likely it's going to be a 1 or a 2, because that's why we developed it. But the goal is to get it to a 7, and we will get it to a 7 because we need it to be at a 7. So we're going to take those ratings, and now we're going to begin. And I ask the client to hold the targeted event, so the breakup, and the negative belief in their mind at the same time. So you're thinking about those two things at the same time, and then I start the bilateral stimulation. So for me, it's a ball on a screen, and I'll have you watch the ball go back and forth at the same pace that we would while we're sleeping. And you're just, whatever comes up, you're just letting it go, letting your brain go where it needs to go. And that's the whole thing with EMDR, is that your brain will process what it needs to process. And I don't want to interrupt that. So the reason why it's not considered talk therapy is because I won't be providing my interpretation. I won't be asking deeper questions in between sets. I'm just going to say, okay, let's go with that. And we'll keep going. So the ball started, you're watching the ball, and it's about 45 seconds that I leave you watching the ball and thinking. I'll stop the ball, and then I'll say take a deep breath, because we want to have that oxygen free flowing. Just continue the oxygen. And then I'll say, what do you notice? And that's a pretty broad question on purpose. I want you to think about what thoughts came up, what feelings, emotions, what memories came up, or even any physical sensations. And that may be one of the only questions that I ask, is if you tell me that you're starting to feel anger. I'll ask, where do you feel that in your body? And that question is to keep you grounded physically and noticing where you feel anger in your body. Some people may deep in the chest, like it's just burning rage in the chest and it goes up their throat. Other people, it's different. They may feel like tense in their shoulders, but it's important to focus on where you feel those emotions in your body. So You've told me whatever came to your mind. I listen, and then I say, okay, let's go with that. Now, it may be frustrating at first for me to not interpret, ask questions, dive a little deeper, but that's on purpose. We want your brain to keep going the same way it's already going. So I say, okay, let's go with that. And I start the ball again. And we do this for the majority of the session. Then, at the end of the session, we switch to the positive belief. So for the positive belief, it's going to be shorter sets. So instead of 45 seconds, it'll be about 10 to 15. And this is after we've brought up all the stuff that's just been like shoved down deep for so long, and it's now up on the surface, and you may feel emotional. You may have different emotions coming up. You may cry a little bit. You may have these different sensations, but that's okay. We want that. We want those emotions to come up. So after we've got all those emotions coming up, we want to just drill in that positive belief. So we take about 10 to 15 seconds, and you're going to be just thinking about that, the positive belief. So I have value regardless. Whether that means you're watching the ball and repeating that phrase in your head, or you're thinking of all the different ways that you do have value, we're really drilling in that positive belief. So now we're at the end of the session, and I will ask you your ratings again. So on that scale of 0 to 10 for the negative belief, and the scale of 1 to 7 for the positive belief. And that way we'll keep track of our progress throughout the 4 to 6 sessions. So I always say that EMDR for a negative belief takes 4 to 6 sessions. But that depends on how deeply ingrained that negative belief is in you. So if it's really deeply ingrained, it could take more than 6. But if it's not as deep, like it doesn't come from young childhood, it's more recent, or it's really just the one event that caused it, then it may take 2 or 3 sessions. You never know. But the goal is to have less feelings around that negative event, that targeted event. So when it's brought up, you're just like, oh, that happened. But you don't get emotional. You don't feel all the same feelings you've been feeling. You don't feel the same as when you were experiencing that event, which is what happens a lot, where people keep reliving it. But now you can think back on it and be like, wow, that happened, but I don't really feel much. I remember it, but that's that. And then the positive belief replaces the negative belief. Instead of feeling like I'm not good enough all the time, now you believe I have value regardless. So now you're going to chase after that job. You're going to ask out that girl you've been thinking about asking out, or DM that guy on Instagram, or try out a new gym. Like, who knows? And so you notice your value, you recognize your value. That's the goal behind EMDR, is to desensitize and reprocess. Now that I've explained what I would explain to a client in the session, I want you to drop some comments in the box. Either if you've tried it and you've experienced EMDR, how was that experience? Or if you heard of it or haven't heard of it, this is your first time and are now interested, what made you interested? I want to hear some comments. So let me know in the box down below, and thank you for watching the Reflection Room.